The machine beeped to signal that Elle's heart rate was rising. She was calling out of a 4-month long cola. Ken looked over and saw Elle love her legs and fingers twitching slightly. He rushed over to her, his heart racing with hope. Elle, Elle, can you hear Lee? Open your eyes, Ken squealed, his voice trembling. He was excited that Lyanna was alive and responsive after all these months. Ken rushed out the door to call the nurse. They both ran back into the room to see Liana looking around, her confused gaze darting. The nurse quickly took the oxygen mask off her. Welcome back, Ly dear. How are you feeling? The nurse asked gently, her voice soft and soothing. Where are I? And what is wrong? Ally, and what is wrong? Asked the nurse, her voice shaky and uncoordinated. Elle did not know where she was and could not remember how she got there. You are at the hospital, said the nurse, her tone calming. Elle looked around her body, trying to coordinate what was going on. She saw a protruding stomach, and her eyes widened in shock. In total disbelief, she squealed, Pregnant? What? Why? How? Where? How am I pregnant? When? How am I pregnant? When did I get pregnant? She was even more confused now, her voice growing frantic. She asked so many questions without waiting for any answer, her thoughts racing. Ken stepped closer to hold her, gently stroking her arm to calm her down, Elle was very frantic, her mind spinning in confusion. Everything was too overwhelming. Call down and we can tell you everything, the nurse explained in a soothing voice. She explained that Elle had just woken up from a coma and had been in it for 4 months. The nurse asked her gently, What is the last thing you remember? Elle paused for a few seconds, her mind desperately trying to catch up with the moment. She replied slowly, I was about to call down the stairs, and suddenly I fell and tumbled down the stairs. Then I had a sharp pain in my head. That's all I can remember. Her voice trailed off as she struggled to recall more. The nurse nodded, understanding the severity of the situation. She informed Elle that it was normal for her to feel disoriented due to the head injury. The nurse asked if she remembered anything before the fall, but Elle could not. When she tried to force the memory before the fall, a sharp migraine and blurred vision overwhelmed her. The nurse told her to rest and assured her that her memory would return gradually. Elle asked about her pregnancy, her voice trembling with concern. The nurse calmed her down and told her they would explain more later, but at the moment she needed to rest. Where is my boyfriend Derek? Elle asked, her voice soft and filled with longing. Ken was about to spill the story to Liana, but the nurse quickly intervened, sensing the tension. He went home briefly. He will be back, she said, trying to keep the peace. Ken's eyes flared with frustration at the nurse's interruption. The nurse guided him outside and reminded him not to tell Liana any bad news, as it might trigger another caller. Ken loved Liana too much to cause her any harm, so he quietly agreed for her sake. The next day, Liana woke up to a room filled with vibrant flowers. She had a lot of flowers in her room, and the nurse informed her that Derek had brought them while she was asleep. Elle smiled softly at the sight, touched by Derek's gesture, but she also felt a pang of sadness that the nurse hadn't woken her up to see him. She missed her boyfriend and wanted to see Hill. The nurse told her to rest so she could heal faster. Elle asked them when Derek would be back to visit, but they had no answer for her. A few hours later, Derek showed up at the hospital, his face lighting up with joy when he saw Elle. He rushed to give her a hug, clearly excited that she was awake. "Do you remember anything?" Derek asked, his voice full of concern. But Elle said no, her confusion still lingering in her eyes. Derek looked surprised to see the pregnancy and gently asked about the protruding belly. Elle had no answers as she couldn't remember how she got pregnant. As Derek sat beside Elle on the bed, two police officers walked into the room. The hospital had filed a case with the police because they suspected that Elle was pushed down the stairs. The police attempted to ask her a few questions, but she could not remember anything before the fall. Derek ordered the police to leave, his protective instincts kicking in as they were causing Elle a lot of distress. The police left, but they told Elle they would like to speak with her when she was ready. When the police walked out, Derek pretended to go buy soul food and quietly followed the officers out of the hospital room. He caught up to them and gave them some information. Derek asked the police to detain and question Larkus, as he was the last person to see Elle and had brought her to the hospital. He also suggested that Ken might have gotten Elle pregnant while at the hospital, given how much time Ken spent with her. Derek informed the police that Liana was his girlfriend and was not pregnant before the fall. The police listened quietly and assured him they would look into it. As they were about to walk away, Derek's anger flared. He asked the police if they weren't going to arrest Ken for questioning. The police responded, "No," and kept walking. Derek was frustrated because he really wanted someone to pay for Elle's pain. He had not come to see Elle in days, and that made Elle very sad. Ken could not stand to see his friend sad, so he decided to go find Derek. Ken went to Derek's house without calling him. As he knocked on the door, a girl approached the door and opened it. She had on Elle's shirt, the one Elle used to wear during their happier times. She introduced herself as Derek's girlfriend. Ken asked for Derek, who was in the bedroom. Derek heard his name and came to the living room to see Ken. Derek grabbed Ken and stepped outside, closing the door to get away from his new girlfriend, and yelled at Ken for showing up at his house unannounced. Ken reminded him that he had a girlfriend who just came out of a coma and was still at the hospital. Ken also informed Derek that he overheard his conversation with the police and how he saw Derek was happy that Elle could not remember anything. Ken accused Derek, "I know you pushed Liana off the stairs because you wanted to kill her to avoid the pregnancy." Derek was shocked that Larkus was aware of Elle's pregnancy. "How do you know that?" Derek asked in panic. "Because Elle is my best friend. She told me how you asked for an abortion." Derek raged at Ken, who stood his ground and dared him to come closer. Ken said, "I hope Elle gets her memory back so she can remember how wicked you are." Derek responded, "Well, I just have to make sure she never gets the memory back." Ken turned around and walked away from Derek. For a few weeks, Derek visited the hospital even more frequently than he did before. He pretended to care so much for Liana. Elle was so happy to see Derek every day that she forgot all about Ken, who had been there for her the entire time she was in the coma. Ken felt cheated and abandoned. He left and promised never to come back. But Ken loved Elle too much to stay away from her for too long. A few weeks later, he changed his mind and visited Lyanna. When he walked into the hospital, he saw the police officers talking with Derek and Liana. Derek had convinced Liana and the police that Ken was the one behind Liana's predicament. The police arrested Ken and took him to the station for questioning. Elle believed Derek, and she was very sad and upset at her best friend, Ken. She felt betrayed and hurt. Ken was too shocked. He did not know where those lies came from. Derek had told Liana a lot of stories, and they were all lies against Ken. He was the one that found Liana unconscious at the bottom of the stairs. He was the one that brought her to the hospital, and he had stayed with her the entire time. How could she do this to me? I have been the one loving and caring for her this entire time, Ken said. Because there was no other witness or fingers pointed to Ken that he pushed Liana down the stairs. After a few days, Liana was discharged from the hospital and Derek took her home. When Elle got home, she became sick again. She vomited violently and had a high temperature. Derek convinced Elle that those were the symptoms related to the pregnancy. One day, after eating some food that Derek kept for her, Elle vomited so badly that she started bleeding very heavily. She called the neighbor who took her to the hospital. The doctors battled to stabilize her because she had lost a lot of blood. After a series of tests, the doctors found that she had miscarried and had been slowly poisoned over a period of time. The police were called in to arrest Derek for questioning. Derek denied all the accusations, but as he was being held for questioning, Ellie's memory slowly returned. She yelled for the nurse, who rushed into her room. She narrated how Derek raped her, and when she got pregnant, he denied the pregnancy and tried to force her to abort the child. The nurse was worried about the truth of her story because she had just recently had a severe head trauma. So Liana convinced the nurse by showing her text messages she had with Derek about the rape issue. Derek had acknowledged the rape and threatened to make Elle a laughingstock if she told anyone about it. He even threatened her that if she left him, he would leak Elle's naked pictures, which he took secretly. Elle also informed the nurse that Ken came to her house because she had told Ken to come by in the evening to meet with Derek and beg him to accept the pregnancy. Ken went late, and by the time he arrived, Derek had already left after pushing Elle down the stairs. He found Elle laying unconscious at the bottom of the stairs. The nurse called the police back to the hospital to get all the information. Elle and Ken showed up at court to testify against Derek. Derek was sentenced to prison for attempted murder and for rape. Elle apologized to Ken for not believing him and also thanked Ken for protecting her and bringing her to the hospital on time. Ken and Elle reconciled and stayed great friends. The lesson from this story is clear. Always respect others' boundaries and never force someone to do something against their will. It's important to value trust, honesty, and kindness in every relationship, as betrayal and manipulation only lead to pain and regret. No matter the situation, remember that no means no. Thank you so much for watching my channel, and I encourage you to explore more thought-provoking and engaging videos we have in store. Stay tuned for more amazing content. Just like the evening before, the food she made was different from the one her husband was used to. The aroma was unfamiliar, and the spices didn't blend the way they should. Then he asked again, "What's wrong with the meal this morning again?" But this time Nia couldn't find the perfect lie to tell. She had to admit and tell the truth. "I never learned to cook or do housework," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. She stared at her hands, once adorned with delicate henna designs, now trembling with nervousness. These words were hard for her to say. They reminded her of all the years she missed learning these important things. Once upon a time, in a small African village, hugged by green hills and rivers, lived a girl named Nia. The air in the village always smelled of fresh earth after the morning rain, and the laughter of children echoed through the dusty paths. Nia was not just any girl. She was like the morning sun, bright and beautiful. Everybody in the village knew her. When she walked through the marketplace, even the birds seemed to sing a bit sweeter. The market was always bustling with traders, selling colorful fabrics, dried fish, and ripe mangoes. The scent of roasted peanuts and spicy stew filled the air. Nia had a sister, Lainey. Naya was also a beauty, but she was like the moon to Naya's sun, nice but not as bright. People saw Lani, but it was Nia they remembered. You see, in this village, Naya was like a rare gem that everyone admired, but not everything was as perfect as it seemed. The women in the village had a worry, their husbands. They held their husbands' hands a bit tighter and drew them closer when Nia passed by. Her beauty was a bit too much, they thought a bit too shiny. So they whispered and watched, careful to keep their home safe from the shine of Naya. Nia and Lani's parents loved both their daughters. Yes, but Nia was their star, their favorite child. They treated her like she was made of gold. Nia didn't have to fetch water or go to the farm. All she did was sit pretty, making beads and smiling like the morning sun. The beads she made were intricate, woven with tiny, delicate shells and vibrant colors that shimmered in the sunlight. Lani, on the other hand, did all the hard work. She fetched the water, helped on the farm, and did so much more. This favoritism started to dig a hole between the sisters. Lani, with each passing day, felt a bit more shadow than moon. And Nia, well, she was stuck in her golden cage, shining, but not really living. In this village of tales and songs, the story of Naya and Lani was just beginning, a story of beauty, envy, and what it really means to shine. Let's turn the page and see where this path leads. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, the village remained wrapped in its usual rhythms of life. The pounding of millet, the ringing of laughter from children chasing each other in the fields, and the distant drum beats at night filled the air. But in the heart of Lainey Nia's sister, something was changing. A small seed of jealousy, watered by the days, was growing. You see, it wasn't just the villagers who noticed Naya. Men from other kingdoms, men with heavy pockets and high titles, started coming. They brought gifts, fine clothes, shiny beads, and even gold, all for Nia, they said, for the village jewel. They smiled at her, their eyes shining like the gifts they brought. As for Lainey, she stood in the background, hands filled with chores, heart filled with a growing shadow. The parents, bless their hearts, didn't help much. They were busy polishing their jewel. Nia, don't go to the river, they'd say. Your skin will get too dark. Don't help in the kitchen. Your hands will get rough. All the while, Lainey's hands were getting rougher, her skin darker from the sun. She would return from the farm with dust clinging to her feet and sweat glistening on her brow, while Nia remained untouched by labor. Naya saw this. She saw the weight on Lainey's shoulders. Sometimes she tried to help. She sneaked into the kitchen or tried to grab a water pot, but their mother was always there, quick as a cat. No, Nia, you'll ruin your beauty. Let Lainey do it. Nia would look at Lani, eyes full of sorrow, but she dared not say or do anything. Lani felt alone, alone in the middle of all the noise. It was like she was a shadow, unseen, always behind. People in the village, they'd ask her, "How's Naya?" As beautiful as ever. But nobody ever asked about Lani. As days rolled by, Lanie's heart grew heavy, with questions about her place in the family, her worth in her parents' eyes. She decided to confront them. One evening, as the sun kissed the horizon in a golden embrace, she asked them, "Why do you treat us so differently? Why is everything about Naya?" Their parents, taken aback, tried to explain. "Nia is special, a gift to our family. Her beauty can bring us fortune. It's not that we love you less, but Nia's beauty is a rare thing." But these words, they didn't soothe Lainey's aching heart. They sounded hollow, unfair. She felt a sting, a deep ache that wasn't easy to heal. Her parents' words echoed in her mind, but they didn't reach her heart. Dissatisfaction brewed inside her, a storm that wasn't ready to come. The days in the village rolled on, and Naya, the village jewel, found a husband, not just any man, but the son of the wealthiest man in the village. This match was like a fairy tale, the kind grandmothers told under the starlit sky. And after introducing him to her family, they started planning a wedding. The wedding was a grand affair. Drums echoed, feet danced, and voices sang in celebration. The whole village was dressed in colors bright as the sun. The air smelled of roasted meat and fresh palm wine. Naya looked like a queen adorned in beads and fabrics that shimmered like the river at sunrise. People from far and near came to witness this union. They said this wedding is like a dream. Look at how lucky Naya is. Meanwhile, Lainey's journey was different. Away from the limelight, she met a man. He wasn't wealthy like Naya's husband, but his heart was rich with kindness. He worked hard, his hands as honest as his smile. He saw Lani not just as Nia's sister, but as Lani the moon with her own gentle light. They fell in love, a love as deep and steady as the roots of the baobab tree. Their wedding was simpler, but the joy was just as full. The village celebrated, but the fanfare was softer, more like a gentle stream than a roaring river. Lani didn't mind. In her heart, she knew she had found true love. Not a fairy tale, but something real and warm. Her husband would often bring her wildflowers from the fields, their colors bright against the earthen pots in their small home. Both sisters, in their own way, started new chapters, Nia in her grand union, and Lani with her heart full of quiet happiness. The village watched their tales weaving into the tapestry of village life. Time passed quietly in the village. And in Naya's new house, a big secret was about to come out. Naya, always treated special, never learned to do housework. Her hands, which looked nice, didn't know how to cook or clean. The embroidered cloths on her table remained spotless, not because of her efforts, but because of the maid's diligent hands. At first, Naya kept this secret from her husband. She was smart and found ways to hide it. She would give money to the maid who did the cooking and cleaning, and then tell her husband, "I made this for you." She'd say, smiling. Her husband, not knowing the truth, would thank her, saying she was the best cook in the whole world, but secrets have a way of coming out. One day the maid got sick. There was nobody to cook. Nia, feeling nervous, tried to do it herself. She remembered the food her mother and Lainey made, but she couldn't cook like them. The aroma of roasted yams she once loved was nowhere to be found in her attempts. That night, her husband sat down to eat, expecting a good meal, but the food wasn't good. The soup was too watery and the vegetables were not cooked right. He looked confused. What happened? He asked. Naya lied, saying there weren't fresh vegetables in the house and the ingredients too. She used just the little available, and since the maid was sick, she couldn't send her to the market to get fresh vegetables and ingredients. She pleaded and convinced her husband that night. Then came the following morning. The maid was still sick, so Nia had to make the meal herself again. Just like the evening before, the food she made was different from the one her husband was used to. Then he asked again, "What's wrong with the meal this morning again?" But this time, Nia couldn't find the perfect lie to tell. She had to admit and tell the truth. "I never learned to cook or do housework," she said. These words were hard for her to say. They reminded her of all the years she missed learning these important things. The scent of burnt rice filled the air, a stark contrast to the delicious meals she had always been served. Her husband went from being confused to upset. "How do you not know these simple things?" he asked. He was shocked that his wife, known for her beauty, didn't know how to take care of her home. He made a quick decision. He packed up Naya's things and sent her back to her parents. "You were treated like a queen, but a queen, but a queen, but a queen should know about her home," he said. Nia went back to her parents' house. This house, once a happy place, now felt like a prison. The laughter that once filled the rooms was replaced with whispered regrets. She was more than just a pretty face. She was more than just a pretty face. She was a reminder that beauty isn't everything. Her parents looked sad and sorry. They knew they made a mistake in how they raised her. But this understanding came too late, like rain that comes after the crops have already gone bad. After everything that happened, people in the village quietly talked about Naya coming back home. In her parents' house, everyone felt sad, and there were many things they didn't talk about. Then a big secret that had been hidden for a long time came out. Lainey, who always watched everything quietly, saw that her parents and Nia were not getting along. One night, as the crickets sang their lullaby, Lainey's parents sat them down. The air was heavy with the weight of impending revelations. "Lanny," they began, their voices barely above a whisper, "you were adopted." Naya was shocked. She had always felt a little different from the rest. Now she knew why. This was a big piece of her life story that she had just found out. The moonlight streaming through the window cast long shadows as the truth settled into her heart. Their parents looked sad and sorry. They said, "We thought Naya's beauty would make you less important. That's why we did things this way. But we were wrong." They were sorry for not speaking up about this before. Naya felt upset by this. She realized her whole life was like a pretty box with nothing inside. She told her parents how she felt. "You raised me to be seen, not to really live. You taught me how to be pretty, not how to be pretty, not how to handle life." She was honest about how much this hurt her. That night, everyone in the room felt really sad. They cried and talked about how they felt. They said sorry to each other and forgave each other. And forgave each other. It was hard, like cleaning a cut, but they had to do it. Lainey and Naya, now knowing the whole truth, understood each other and their parents better. They knew their parents weren't perfect and had made mistakes. The sisters felt closer because they shared this hard time and knew understanding. The next morning they walked together to fetch water, a task Nia had never done before, yet she found a strange sense of peace in its simplicity. As time went on, the family started to change how they were together. They loved each other for who they were, not just for how they looked or where they came from. The village ever watchful saw the change. They saw Nia not just as a jewel, but as a woman growing into her strength. They saw Lainey no longer just a shadow, but a light in her own right. You see, this story, like many others, teaches us a lot. It shows us that beauty without skill is like a river without water. It tells us that loving someone more than others is not fair. It reminds us that life can surprise us with lessons we never expected to learn. In the end, Naya and Lainey, with their parents, walked the path of redemption, a path that taught them the true value of upbringing and the importance of being equipped for life, not just to look good. This story teaches us a valuable lesson. Beauty alone is not enough. Nia's journey shows that while admiration can make someone feel special, it does not prepare them for real, life responsibilities. True worth comes from knowledge, skills, and independence. A person must be more than just a pretty face, they must be equipped to handle life's challenges. Additionally, the story highlights the dangers of favoritism in families. Parents should nurture all their children equally, valuing their unique strengths rather than prioritizing appearance. Lainey, though overshadowed for years, found true happiness through her resilience and personal growth. This teaches us that self-worth is not defined by how others see us, but by our own efforts and character. In the end, both sisters learned that true fulfillment comes not from external admiration, but from inner strength and wisdom. Thank you for watching my channel. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more meaningful and inspiring content. Stay tuned for more exciting videos. Enough, you fool! We warn you. How dare you lay your hands on the king? You will pay dearly for this useless woman. Once upon a time, there lived a beautiful woman named Leela. Leela was known for her beautiful smile and her kindness. Her nickname was Smiler, as the villagers fondly called her. She was a very cheerful person who always made sure that people around her were happy in her own little way. She had a little business where she weaved beautiful baskets and sold them in the Moa market. Her baskets were used for home decorations, jewelry organizers, and more. The Moa market, bustling with colorful stalls and the chatter of merchants, was the heart of the village, and Leela's stall stood out because of her intricate designs and welcoming demeanor. She was also popular for making beautiful baskets known in our entire village and the neighboring villages who came to do business in Moa. On the day of her marriage, all her customers came to celebrate with her. They were happy, and there was lots of food to eat. It was the wedding of the people, and it was so because of her nature of business that made her so popular, and also her beautiful smile. Therefore, they came to celebrate with her in their numbers. Her husband, Theo, was a businessman who always traveled for business. A very gentle and humble man, he was also a kind and passionate gentleman who always stood up for the truth. He was a good man, known for his calm demeanor and thoughtful words, which earned him respect among the villagers. However, a heavy sorrow weighed on her heart. She was barren, unable to bear children. She longed to hold her own children. She desired to be called mother, but they were not forthcoming. Gradually, the once very cheerful and kind Leela started changing. She became very aggressive. She would cry all day. She became a shadow of herself. Soon she stopped weaving. She was always at home crying. People stopped patronizing her. Sales were not forthcoming any longer. That cheerful charm was no longer there, as she had completely changed. Her home, once filled with the lively aroma of woven reeds and cheerful laughter, became quiet and somber. So she stopped the weaving business and stayed at home crying. Her husband encouraged her to be patient, but she wouldn't, as she was so desperate to have a child. Soon she became the talk of the town, as it was already 5 years, and there was no sign of pregnancy, nor even a miscarriage. She went to wherever was recommended by anyone. Sometimes she went to prayer houses where they would tell her to bring some money, and they would fast and pray for her. Then she'd be pregnant. But after 1 year, still no sign of pregnancy. She was sometimes taken to witch doctors, where she was told to bring goats, cows, and all manner of items, yet nothing to show for it. Everyone gossiped about her in the village. It's been 8 years, and there was still no sign of pregnancy. She became even more frustrated. The people who were once her friends became her worst nightmare, as they regularly mocked her. They called her all manner of names. Some said she had given her kids to her spirit husband. Some said she was a witch and had donated her womb for rituals, and that's why she made so much money from her weaving business. All manner of awful things were said about her. She kept crying day and night, but her husband kept consoling her. I understand what you're going through, but be patient with God. He will give us children. I'm not complaining, so forget about whoever is talking to you. Forget about whoever is insulting you. Am I not your husband? Are you not the one who is being mocked? You're not the one that has been called names? You go about your business activities without anyone calling you barren. But me, wherever I turn, there is someone waiting to remind me that I am responsible for my childlessness, or that I am a barren woman. Am I not more than children to you? It doesn't matter if you bear children for me or not. I still love you, and that's all that matters. I believe in His own time God will give us children, not just a child. So cheer up. Your mother will come and call me names. Your siblings, especially your sisters, will call me a witch and a barren woman who only knows how to eat their brother's money. Please, just let me be, she said. She kept crying. She was so frustrated and desperately in need of a child. She lost focus. She stopped believing. She lost her faith in God. She just wanted any means at all, as long as it was going to work for her. But her husband kept telling her that God's time is the best and she should be patient. She said, if God wanted me to have a child, He had 8 years to prove it. I'm done hoping and believing. Somehow, I will help myself. One day, Leela's neighbor, Mira, told her of a prophet who sees visions. She said, he's a very powerful man, and he can help you. He has helped a lot of women, and I know he will help you. Mira assured her that this was going to be the last place she would go to, so she agreed. Leela could not sleep all through that night. She was thinking about what Mira had told her. She was excited and afraid at the same time, but she had made up her mind to go with Mira or any other person as long as it was going to yield fruit. Pondering and wondering what Kofi, the man Mira told her about, would look like, and if it would work just like Mira had said or not, she had so many thoughts on her mind. She didn't tell her husband what she had discussed with Mira because she knew he would never approve of her going with Mira. He was never in support of those places she went to, but she went there anyway without his consent. One fateful Saturday morning, as early as 600 a.m., Lila and Mira were at Kofi's house. The house, shrouded in mystery with its tall bamboo fence and dimly lit interior, seemed otherworldly. He told her what she came for. She was surprised. "Don't worry, this week you'll be pregnant. I assure you. I have helped several women like you, and yours won't be different. Don't be afraid, your weeping days are over. You will carry your own child in your hands 9 months from now." Mira and Leela looked at each other and smiled. Mira was happy for her, and Leela had the feeling that this was the very last place she would visit for a child. She knew in her heart that this was the last one, and that she was going to have a child after this one. But you need to be aware of what it entails, your do's and don'ts. Whatever it takes, I'm ready. I'm willing to take the risk. I'm willing to take the risk. I'm fed up with this mockery, the shame, the reproach, and all the names people call me, she said. Okay then, every December you will sacrifice a goat, a dove, 5 tubers of yam, 5 bottles of Fanta, palm oil, 10 cowries, and a packet of biscuits. Is that all for a whole year? This is very little. I can afford it on a weekly basis. Quiet, he said. You must be ready to pay the ultimate sacrifice. Are you ready? Yes, she fearfully agreed. Now listen, he said. You will have a son, but you must never lay your hands on him or scold him, no matter what. He is a king and must be treated like a king. Whatever he does, just let him be. Whoever touches him is dead. I said he is a king. She was confused and wondered what kind of king he was talking about. Lost in thought, Kofi shouted, "Do you understand?" "Yes, I understand." "You better do, because your life and everyone around you depends on it." "Oh, okay." She was a bit scared, but she was determined to do whatever it takes to have a child. So she was willing to risk it, despite being told of the dangers that lied ahead. The air was thick with the smell of burning herbs as Kofi took her to the river, told her to remove her clothes, and he made several incantations and sacrifices. He tied a goat and other items they brought for the sacrifice. Everything was said and done under the eerie glow of a crescent moon. They went back home. That same week, Leela became pregnant. She was very happy. She started being cheerful again. Her husband was surprised at her sudden change. She kept glowing as her beauty shone like a beacon. She told her husband she was pregnant. He was so happy, and he brought so many gifts for her. Soon, the news of her pregnancy went around the entire village. Some came to her house to see for themselves. Others came to mock her. But they got there and saw a beautiful woman glowing with the beauty of her early pregnancy days. She started weaving again with a renewed sense of purpose. Those who ran away from her came back to her. She had more customers now than ever. Sales were multiplying, business was booming, and everything seemed perfectly all right. 9 months later, she gave birth to a cute little prince. No one knows the source of the baby except Mira, who took her to Kofi, and herself. It was a secret between the two of them alone. People came with gifts to welcome the newborn baby. He was a very cute little prince. His parents named him Zid, meaning, "I have a child now." Everyone who saw him loved him. Little did they know that trouble had just been born. He would cry all night, keeping his parents awake. As soon as the day dawned, he would sleep. He kept doing this for the first 7 months after his birth. Then he stopped. Leela thought everything was over. Little did she know that it had just gotten started. After 5 years, Zid would say strange things, and you'd be wondering where he heard them from or who taught him. Sometimes he would call older people names, but the mom